I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. This is the second part, the Q&A session from our live event, which took place on April 27, 2024. The first part can be found in episode 405, Finding Healing, Peace, and Joy. It's my conversation with featured guest, clinical psychologist, author of several books, and host of the Think, Act, Be podcast, Seth Gillihan. Exciting news! Due to the overwhelming success and positive feedback from our live events, we are thrilled to announce that we are considering hosting them twice a year in both the spring and fall. If you want to stay up to date on future events and join in on the conversation, consider signing up for the Authentic Parenting newsletter on my website or joining our Facebook group. Speaking of future events, we already have our next one lined up for October, although I'll keep the guest's identity under the wraps for now. Just know that she's an incredible individual and a former guest on the show. Back to the Q&A session. The first question comes from Ellen Gottlieb, author of How to Raise a Parent. She appeared and a former guest of the podcast. You might remember her from episode 283, The Hard Truth About Parenting the Conscious Way. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend it. And finally, my favorite part of the evening, hearing everyone's takeaways. It's always inspiring to see the diverse perspectives and insights shared by our community. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening.
So, related, of course, to the concept of radical acceptance, I work with a lot of people who are doing work on their own growth, right, on their own self-awareness. But it takes a long time, right? I always joke that you can learn the tool and then you need 30 years and then you'll get there. So what I find people have as they're aging, 50s, 60s, and 70s, is a lot of regret and remorse about time spent in an unconscious way, which related and caused certainly certain behaviors to manifest that they wish they hadn't done. How do you work with people on radical acceptance of what feels like lost time when you were living in the self with the small s? What I often call the inner child, as opposed to that awareness that there's a greater self. And how do you sit with the pain of what feels like lost time, even though you were doing your best, because that's all you knew in that moment?
A lot of the answer that I would give is in what you said. The person was doing their best. I'd probably start by leading a person through an exploration of, were you doing your best? Did you live this way because you decided at some point that living unconscious was the best approach to life? When people usually come to see, as defeating as it might seem at first, I was doing the best I could. That was the insight that I have now wasn't available to me before, and if it had been, I would have lived differently. But there is so often a grief that comes with waking up, because you realize, oh my God, I've been sleepwalking for however many decades. So it's also the case that nothing said you had to wake up. If you woke up at 60, well, you might have still been sleeping at 70 or when you died. So there can be a recognition of well, thank goodness I finally woke up at all. And then encouraging through that sense of waking up. Part of that is the grief is real, so making space for the grief of what was lost or it feels like it could have been, and actually naming that as grief, I find can be helpful. And also recognizing that some of what we're coming to, if we're coming to greater acceptance or greater aliveness, is making room for everything, including for our past self who lived the best way that self knew to. I've had this experience of being sort of reconnected to my previous self. I always feel a lot of emotion when I describe this, but like the self that was in the trenches, so maybe the self that was 35 and building a career, speaking of like older clients that we might run into, their 50s and 60s, go back to that self, ask them what it was really like. Well, like, were you doing the best you could? Yeah, I was. And I feel like my younger self said to my current self, like, don't sit where you are now and judge me. Like, because I was there. Like, I was in it. I was the one who was going through it. And you're where you are now if you're sitting on your high horse judging me for the mistakes I made. Like you're there because of what I did to get you there. So show a little gratitude, buddy. Like, that's sort of the feeling that I had. But it was a kind of, don't you dare, my younger self to my current self, don't you dare look back on me and pity me or think that you're better than I am, because I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who went through it.
We hear a lot about nervous system regulation and being a regulated parent and gentle parenting. And you talked a little bit about, I believe you were talking about nervous system regulation or exploration when you were talking about felt sensation in the body. How does your work, what's your views on that kind of current conversation? Because there's a lot of it. And what do you, where you sit, what would you either add or what do you feel is missing from how we can think about those concepts?
Thanks for the question. I think there's a lot to that. I think it's easy to live in a constant state of nervous system dysregulation and not even realize it because it feels so normal. Because I'm so used to living in this super heightened state that it feels like just the way things are, or it might even be a state that we kind of chase because it activates us and gives us energy. So I think it can be really valuable to learn to recognize signs of stress in the body and to find ways to do things to keep ourselves within a more adaptive state of being able to react to things, or respond to things without automatically reacting from an overactive nervous system. What I like to do in this area is build in kind of programmatic ways of checking in with ourselves and, for example, letting go of unnecessary stress. So having consistent practices to do that, because the stresses we're going to experience are, maybe the specific ones are unpredictable, but it's pretty predictable that we're going to experience stress throughout the day. So if we can plan in advance, like I'm going to pause before lunch and take a couple of breaths with awareness and just check in with myself. Those kind of consistent practices done at planned times when they're going to give us the most leverage can be helpful. So I'm maybe in my drive home from work, if driving or walking or whatever, maybe that's a time when I can do some easy breathing exercises, or waking up in the morning before I launch into the day, I can kind of center myself in my body and with my breath and then move from that place instead of from a sort of swirling, like grabbing my phone first thing place. So that's probably what I would focus on, is the kind of the systematic approach.
You referenced before our individual capacity for discomfort before we look to escape, and I recently learned the term discomfort tolerance. So I'm curious when that is formed and if you have any suggestions for skills and tools that could help us increase our discomfort tolerance.
No, you can respond. You're the guest. The pressure is off of me. No, I'm kidding. When do we develop? From childhood, right? Distress tolerance begins the moment you hold your baby when they're crying. When we respond to our children's cries, when we meet their needs, they communicate through their cry. That's when distress tolerance begins. And let's say a toddler, I feel like, I don't want to turn this into a parenting podcast, but I notice a trend in our culture with gentle parenting particularly, that people are not focusing on increasing distress tolerance in their children. They're trying to bypass discomfort by placating, speaking nicely, making things better, or giving way too much into the discomfort and making it even a bigger deal. And so the child doesn't learn how to gauge that, right? So parents have a lot to do with increasing the discomfort, tolerance. When your child is experiencing a negative feeling, can you be with them and support them while they're going through that experience so that they're not scared and alone? You're there, but you're not freaking out also about their feelings. So you have this adequate level, but it's hard to do because our parents didn't do this for us. So it's hard to give it to our children. And so can we increase our distress tolerance? Yes, sure. Can we sit with that anxiety a little more before we go into Netflix and tune out? every time, little by little, you can increase that distress tolerance. I mean, I can say a whole lot, but I want you to say things.
That's a great answer. And yet, it seems to be formed early. There's even evidence that some dimensions of distress tolerance are hereditary. So it tends to run in families to some extent, low versus high distress tolerance. You might see like a really low level of distress tolerance in borderline personality, for example, where it feels just intolerable.
Or neurodivergent children too, right? Yeah, they too. They don't have it's very narrow, that gap between stimulus and response.
And parenting, like Anna said, can have a huge impact on a person's ability to tolerate or not tolerate distress. I think I'm glad you brought up the point about the more kind of contemporary trend toward trying to protect kids from all distress, which is so understandable as a parent. Like when our 13-year-old's guinea pig died recently, and it's so difficult to see. I mean, I was really broken up about Mia dying too, but just to see, grief in your child, and just wanting, God, I would love to take that away, to distract or something, or let's watch something fun, but realizing, I'll be here with you, but you're just going to need to go through it. But that does teach such strength in our kids, this idea that it's written about more lately about teaching kids that they can be anti-fragile. Not that you're not only are you not fragile, but that you develop greater strength and toughness in the best possible way by going through difficult things.
With the support of a loving parent, not like, buddy, you're on your own, you're going to be fine. Not like that attitude, because that can do more harm. But with someone, there is an experiment, I think it was done in Virginia. So there's a 3 group of women. They are exposed to shock and it's painful. The first group goes without anybody by themselves. They know that it's scary and it's going to be painful, and they have a lot of anxiety about this experiment. The second group goes with a staff member holding their hand or being present in the room. And the third group of women have their loving partner holding their hand while they're going through this discomfort, right? A stress response. And who had better results later, right, after the experiment? The third group, because they had someone with them while they experienced this fearful, anxiety-inducing experience, and the result post-experiment was short-lived. They didn't have any impact. But those of the first group who didn't have anyone with them, obviously it was more painful. So having a loving person who supports you and is there, it makes a big difference. But it has to be the adequate type of support, right? You can't minimize or make it worse for your kid. I feel like this gentle parenting is doing some harms. I've been lately contemplating about that. The perils of gentle parenting. I'm going to do a podcast about this.
So I don't have a question exactly, but this conversation reminded me of an idea that I've heard elsewhere. So I just wanted to show you, since it connected for me, I thought I'd connect it for everybody. So Amanda Diekman is a parent and podcaster who teaches low demand parenting. And she talks about low demand. A demand is anything that is hard. That's what a demand is. And when things are hard, we show up. We do our best. We call in for help. We just endure it. We do whatever we do when things are hard. But when things are too hard, that's when we drop it. And we drop it for our kids. We drop it for ourselves. We don't overextend, as you were saying, Seth. And that the root of doing low demand right, doing it well, is radical acceptance, and that changes every relationship. These are my notes from the podcast interview where I heard her talk about this most clearly to me. Letting go of the things that people are telling us, or that our body is telling us, or that our kids are showing us, this is too hard. Listen to that. And that is accepting that, okay, this is something that I will meet you where you're at. I will love you where you're at. I accept that that's where you're at. And there are a lot of nuances, and that's why she has whole books and podcasts on the whole topic. But it was an interesting connection that I made that I just wanted to share. And then separately was another comment that I wrote down for myself, that we talked about sitting with our uncomfortable feelings, enduring them. They're temporary, they'll pass, all of that. I think the flip side of that is also super important. That's when feelings are pleasant and enjoyable, and we're watching our kids splash in the pool and it's so wonderful and we love that experience. That too is temporary, and that also will pass. And that's also something to notice how it feels. And we don't call that enduring, we call that savoring. But it's the same sort of experience of, this is going to pass. let me notice it while it's here, and then it will be gone.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Before we move to the other room and have some food, come on.
You guys started right off the bat talking about acceptance, and I feel like it's really easy to talk about, oh, just practice acceptance and yeah, just that's all you have to do. But that's really hard. And is there... it's so much easier said than done. Is there a practice, like something that's a little more tangible than just being like, we need to practice acceptance. We need to just let it go or let it be. And it's just so, is there something that's a little bit more user-friendly, with acceptance?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the question. It's so true. I often I'll hear myself saying these things and I'll realize yeah, this is super easy to say. Like it just flows right out. Like I just say it, just practice, open, widen the lens, take in. So I think all that is true. And yes, it's really hard to do. There are times when we just don't feel like accepting, which we can also make space for. Accept it right now. I don't feel like being mindful. That's not what I want to do. All right, that's how I feel. I don't feel like making space for the non-acceptance either. That's BS. All right, make room for that.
But that's acceptance.
Exactly.
Accepting that you're not accepting what you're experiencing.
Yes.
That's also acceptance.
So you can keep zooming back. So that's one level. At the same time, I think it's really, like when I'm working with a patient, I'm not... It's not like I'm just hammering away at okay, how can you accept that? How can you accept that? But it's more nuanced than that. It's hopefully more empathic than that. So some of acceptance is accepting that you're going to just be fed up and self-pitying someday. Like for me, that's acceptance. For me, part of gratitude is being grateful that the universe makes space for my lack of gratitude and my resentment. Like, wow, that's amazing. Like, thanks for that. Like, there's a Seth's resentment-shaped space in the universe that accommodates that. And then on the nuts and bolts level, there are practices. This comes back to distress tolerance, too, of like sitting in meditation can be helpful for not just training the attention or finding non-dual awareness, but noticing that my nose itches and I really want to scratch it right now. But can I just sit with that? Just notice what that feels like. Can I accept that my nose itches? If I do scratch it, can I cut myself a break and don't berate myself for that? Part of acceptance is grieving. So I think anytime acceptance feels like a burden, that's not really a kind of acceptance that I would endorse, but it's more of an invitation. And it's it's sort of everything, but it's also, if it's cheap or seems too easy, then it's probably not really the kind of worthwhile type of acceptance.
I think I'll add a couple of things. From my own experience, acceptance, we don't have to work at accepting. It eventually comes. It's not a thing you want to do. It just happens. Once you grieve the thing that you are dealing with. For me, that's how I see that. Once you sit with that discomfort of the feeling that you're feeling about something and it's hard for you to accept that whatever it is, and cry, be in pain, go to therapy, have someone witness you in that pain. Let's say someone is going through a divorce. Why did this happen to me? If that person doesn't process that, our pain needs to be witnessed. We need to cry in the company of a loving person, an adult, a friend, a therapist, and acceptance will come slowly. It doesn't happen automatically. It's easy to say in this kind of context, acceptance, but it's a process and you don't work at it. It happens to you, but someone needs to witness your pain if your pain is too big and you can't get to the acceptance by yourself. For me, acceptance comes after grieving, whatever the experience is, through pain usually. Accepting and being with that pain, acceptance is always available. It's there.
Yeah, I also like to strip away the kind of the varnish off of acceptance because it can feel really polished and kind of nice, like the cover of a mindfulness magazine. The acceptance, it feels sort of unavailable. So to instead see it as something that's raw and that's messy and that comes as part of a process. And it's not something I don't know. The image that comes to mind is of sort of like someone in a perfect yoga outfit, in a perfect kitchen eating a perfect meal. Like, that's not the kind of acceptance that I'm really thinking about.
There was this meme on social media, I'm sure you've seen it, some skunk or some animal is sitting there and it says, "Inner peace, where are you? I'm waiting for you. Where are you, inner peace?" or something like that. It was a while ago. Anyone else? Christy? That's it? Do you want to add anything to conclude this conversation, Seth? Do you have final thoughts or...
Yeah, the final thing I'll say is also in the direction of acceptance. I love the concept of acceptance that Steve Hayes, who developed acceptance and commitment therapy, what he shared when we spoke, which is that to accept something is the same root as receive. So when I'm accepting something, I'm just receiving whatever life is sending. And it's not, for me, it's not so much I have to, like Anna was getting at, I'm not forcing myself to receive. Whatever is here is already here. It's already been received. So it's more about finding ways to align with what's already been accepted, what's already been received. It's already happened to me. So more as an intention and not as a kind of thing that we bludgeon ourselves with.
Yeah, well, with that, I invite you to give a warm round of applause to our wonderful guest. Thank you, Seth. I'm really honored and pleased that you're here. This is not the end, almost done. These are Lisa's cards. What I want to do is I want to bring the tray, maybe Christy can help, to each and every one of you. But I would love for you to say, everyone, end this evening with, "I take with me something from this evening." Whether that's an insight, a thought, a comment, a feeling, something like that, and pull a card and say a sentence, and we'll conclude like that. But the microphone is not that long, but you can just say it out loud maybe. Do you want to start, Christy? Just show an example how it's done, and then people can... What are you taking away from this evening?
I'm taking away how universal the desire is to kind of understand why life can be so hard.
Perfect. Take a card. Okay.
I am taking away this beautiful community of everyone that is supportive of Anna and just parenting and mindful work.
I'm taking away that little detail that is going to walk with me for a long time about finding a concrete time, think ahead about when I'm going to do my deep breath or my mindfulness or my thing to form my habit, but start with something practical. That's what I'm taking away.
I'm taking compassion for myself and for all of our shared experience.
Took mine. No, I was just so touched by like the depth of your experience, just even listening to your podcast, like your ability to, I think you said in one of your podcasts, you talked about thinking, well, I'm a psychologist, so, I should know all these things. And I think one of the things that really is the entry point to connection is that shared human experience. And so being able to be open and vulnerable and authentic and really let your voice shine is such a gift. And I appreciate being able to experience that. So
Would you like one of your own cards?
Yeah. Let's see. Heartlight. It's one of my favorites. Your Heartlight, Sean?
All right, I'm going to take away the comment you made about walking into the door and something is wrong and letting go of that picture in your mind of how my day should go and accepting how it is going, and, all you can control is your reaction to it and not the actual weather. Anna.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll both be working on that.
Yes.
We're all working. We're all working on that.
I am taking away that accepting that I'm not accepting a situation is still accepting the situation. Thank you for that.
The self-responsibility, that it's my responsibility to take care of myself, like that. The way acceptance goes in with receiving. Yeah, thank you.
Take a card. Take a card.
Thank you.
I am taking away the concept of letting go, something in particular that happened with my oldest son today, that we were going back and forth about a few things, and I am now going to let it go. I hope it lasts.
Did you put it on your airplane?
I did put it on my airplane.
Okay, well then.
We were trying to read it, and it was pretty detailed. And I even mentioned my son's name, and it was the red one, and you gave up on it.
So I'm going to take away from this the chatter in my head, trying to distinguish whether it's real or not, and when I feel uncomfortable in my body in whatever's going on, be okay with accepting the uncomfortableness and also moving through it and then moving on and not just keep listening to the chatter in the head.
Thank you. So I feel like everything you've said tonight, I felt like you were sort of talking directly to me, both of you, sort of everything you said. But one of the things that particularly resonated with me was the aeroplane exercise. And when you were sort of reading, the things that everybody here is sort of dealing with internally, it sort of made me feel sort of less alone, which in a way kind of made it feel less insurmountable. So thank you for that.
I'm really taken away that, the well-being and, the happiness is really inside ourselves, and this is really responsibility to take care about ourselves and our well-being. Thank you very much for this.
I'll take away what Anna started with, which is the idea that every moment is a gift that we won't get to experience again. So thank you.
I'm first time here, and of course, everybody very kind of struggle with ourselves, every single person, but we never think about everybody else. You're very deep with yourself. So being here, just looking around, I see how many airplanes here, right? So everybody has some struggle, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not only one. I shouldn't be so hard on myself. And plus, when you say universe make a space for us, for you, right? So it's not, I'm not like was following what you were saying, but I use this for my own because I had a lot of questions. And when you say that, I was like, this is puzzle. Actually, we do have space, and we have to be best there. Yeah, thank you so much.
Did everybody go that wanted to go? I can come around with the cards.
And we said we're raffling Cara Alaimo's book. We have 3 copies. So do you have your raffle tickets? Let's see. I'm going to pull the first one, and I'll have Seth pull the second one. The number is 4563618. Was that Cheryl? Are you? I'll repeat. 4563618. I don't know. You want to pull a card?
The winning number is 4563611. We have a winner.
Oh, we have a winner. Good. Well, you will get Cara's book. So yes, one of them.
After we verify your ticket.
Next, 4563617. Yay, Marcy. And the last one.
Okay, last one. 4563612.
Oh, yay!
Congratulations.
Congratulations. You're going to love the book. And like I said, everyone is getting Ellen Gottlieb's book. Whoever has a young child, you'll walk away with a copy of her book. So now let's all move to the other room. We have food, we have wine, non-alcoholic wine, and some beverages, and let's enjoy. Thank you again for coming, everyone. You made my dream come true.